Hello, my name is John, and I'll be giving a fast review of the construction of the T-34 Mentor from Nitroplanes. Before I begin, I can say that this is a very nice model and matches the look of the full-size T-34 very well. I would not recommend this for a beginner, but if you have some experience with RC airplanes, then this is a really good model for the price. These are the parts as they come out of the box. If you've bought an ARF kit before, then the packaging will be exactly what you expect, with everything well protected in plastic foam and cardboard. My airplane had no shipping damage and arrived within 4 days of ordering from the Nitroplanes website. The control surfaces arrive installed with CA hinges, but will need to be superglued into their final position. One word of warning, however: don't glue anything until you are absolutely sure it is ready. The tail section in particular has to go together in a very specific order, and if you glue the rudder or elevator hinges before the tail is put together, you'll be unable to mount the tail surfaces. More on this in a moment. Some basic dimensions for the size of the engine compartment are shown here: 6 inches wide, 3.5 inches high, and 5 inches deep. There's plenty of room for almost any power system, either fuel or electric. The fuselage is just over 6.5 inches inside and a little more than a foot from trailing edge to leading edge of the wing mounts. You can see in these pictures the basic construction of the landing gear retracts, the radio tray, the control system, and the overall fuselage construction. In general, everything is pretty well built, but you may want to consider changing the control rod system. The one from the factory is alright and adequate, but it would be pretty simple to really improve it if you were willing to put forth a few hours of extra work. The tail section fits in place easily, and all the parts are simple to figure out as to their locations. But the order in which they go together is very, very important. It is really easy to forget a part or have something installed backwards or upside down. I suggest putting the whole tail section together before any glue is ever added. You will probably need to assemble and disassemble the tail surfaces several times before it all fits correctly. Be sure not to forget the rod which connects the two elevator halves. It goes through this little notch here. The airplane is covered in some sort of iron-on film similar to those we've all used before, but the surface has a sort of rough texture to it, almost like very fine grit wet-dry sandpaper. The surface is semi-glossy, and the graphics are quite well done, and the rivet detail is a nice touch. On the weird side, however, the use of graphics in inappropriate locations, such as the fuel filler cap underneath the airplane on the belly. Above all with this ARF, the cowling really stands out. It's beautiful. The graphics are great, and the fiberglass is well manufactured with no bubbles or rough spots. Instructions do come with the kit, but they are of very limited use and contain dozens of inaccuracies. The poor instruction booklet is the primary reason I wouldn't recommend this airplane to a beginner. Errors such as these are common throughout the instructions. The hardware bags are complete and actually contain some pretty useful hardware. I only replaced or substituted a few parts within the control system and the engine mount. Otherwise, pretty much everything included in the kit was used and looked pretty good. I removed one of the mechanical retract units to have a look at how they were mounted. Everything is hardwood, placed securely within the wing's framework. You would have to make a really bad landing to break any of the wood within the wing structure. One serious weakness in the airplane is the retractable landing gear system, however. The components are functional, but prone to failure due to their light construction. If you can afford a better set of retracts, I would absolutely recommend doing so. The included retracts will hold up to a few landings, but you will have problems if you fly off of grass or a rough surface. I didn't have the budget to replace the retracts, so I made the best of what was included and modified a few parts. As a side note to the retract units, be sure to CA glue this guide plug, shown here at the end of the blade. The plug comes out easily and the gear will jam if the plug backs out during operation. Both main gear are powered from a servo in the wing, and a separate servo drives a nose wheel retract system. There was one minor problem with joining the wing halves. These little holes at the aft wing peg were never drilled at the factory. It's easy to do, but something the end user shouldn't need to do. There were also some fit problems with a few of the sub-assemblies. In several places, laser-cut holes did not line up where they were supposed to. Again, it's easy for an experienced modeler to fix, but not something a raw beginner should be burdened with doing. When the wing halves were finally joined, there was this curious slot at the leading edge. It was obvious that it was meant to match the slot in the fuselage wing mount, but the instructions showed nothing about it. The little blocks of mystery wood are in the hardware bag, but they look like some sort of servo mount, and there's no mention of them in the instructions. It was time now to start thinking about the engine mount. The engine mounts included with the kit were a disappointment. Both sides of the nylon mount were curved, that is to say the nylon mounts were not straight, but looked like black bananas. I decided not to use them and switched to an unused Hanger 9 mount that I had in my spares box. This required some modifications to the firewall to get the engine and propeller properly positioned and required a few extra hours. The metallic mount shown here is not included in the kit. The fuel tank included with the airplane was actually pretty good and nearly on par with tanks from Sullivan or Dubrow. The problem, however, was that once the stopper and tubing is put together, the tank is too large to be installed. You have to place the empty plastic tank into its mounting area and then insert and install the stopper and tube assembly from the firewall side, while the tank is already inside the nose section. It wasn't easy and required about an hour to complete. Installing the radio gear was very straightforward and will be the same as any other airplane you've ever built. Here's the airplane standing on its wheels for the first time, and here was the first serious problem I encountered during the build. It's hard to see in the picture, but just at the tip of the ballpoint pen, the servo for retracting the main wheels, that's the one down below, interferes with the rudder servo. The two servos are just too close together. Both the cutout for the rudder servo and the cutout for the retract servo were done at the factory. Nitroplanes just dropped the ball on this one. It's a goof in the engineering department. You can either use smaller servos which don't interfere with one another, or you can move one of the servos away from the other. That's what I chose to do. The retract servo has enough room at the edge to cut the wood away and remount the retract servo about 5 millimeters outboard. This provided the rudder servo enough room to move freely. The airplane looks nice with the canopy installed. I balanced my center of gravity where the rivet line is along the top of the wing, just where the ballpoint pin is shown in this picture. The airplane was test flown with a size 52 four-stroke engine at an elevation of 6,000 feet above sea level on a warm summer day. The size 52 engine was enough to fly the airplane pretty well, but getting off the runway was a little underpowered. A cooler day or a sea-level airport would probably make a big difference. I'm sorry I have no pictures of the first test flight, but I can say that the T-34 flew quite well, and the control throws shown in the instructions were more than adequate. The airplane handles as one would expect any low-wing aileron aircraft to behave, and there were no surprises. In flight testing, the airplane did tend to break into a spin when the elevator was pulled all the way back, but even this was mitigated when the center of gravity was moved forward to about 25% of the average aerodynamic chord. If you're an experienced builder, you will enjoy the Nitroplanes T-34, and it will polish up into one of your top-performing sport-scale airplanes. If you're just beginning in the hobby, however, I would suggest waiting on this one. I mentioned earlier that the landing gear retract system in this airplane can be a problem just because it's not very strong. In these next two photos, you can see damage created to the particularly nose gear retract unit after landing twice in some heavy grass. The landings themselves weren't that bad, but the steel parts of the landing gear began to actually deform and buckle the nylon retract unit, as you can see here in these two photos. As it stands right now, I'm going to fly the airplane as a fixed gear airplane and will replace the retracts with more sturdy Robarts or some other manufacturer's retracts and as soon as I can afford it. Thanks very much for watching, and if you decide to buy this airplane, it is quite a nice airplane despite the problems.